Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song you'd like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's special selection comes out as from Kevin. Much like yesterday, we're going to be looking at another Fates Warning track. This time the song is 20 years, or was created 26 years after the track that was requested yesterday. So this is going to be real interesting. We have a then and now, an old versus new kind of thing going on. It's going to be interesting to hear how their sound has developed. This one is twice as long. I'm going to try to not focus on that too much. Obviously, this one was designed as an epic more so than the other, and I don't want that. I'm going to try not to weigh that too heavily on, focusing on their style, right? So yeah, let's dive into this. We got The Longest Shadow of the Day. Beautiful little intro there. Starting off real quiet, kind of jazzy. Yeah, super jazzy with the bass line there. Love those little 16th note embellishments in the cymbals. Dude, that bass sounds so good. Yeah, beautiful palm muted idea there. Really interesting, the variety of syncopated ideas that were showing up in that left guitar. Okay. Huge chunky riffs. Yeah, we entered a sort of a triplet feel right here. Interestingly, the bass kick is doing 1 and 3 of a triplet. Yeah, that silence really allows the section to breathe and transitions it into more of a super syncopated section, primarily in the core atmosphere. That bass tone, man. Interesting tom sound over here, very powerful. Almost sounded like someone knocking on a door. Dude, this song gives me some energy, some real energy. Okay. So we're in 11/4, but with a triplet feel. I love the production on whatever the sound is. It's kind of swirling around my. Oh, that guitar. I love like that detuning element on the second guitar. Okay. Bit of a harsh transition, but I think it works really well given that we're going back into this concept just with the distortion turned on. That 5/6. Yeah. So yeah, being that it's an odd number of beats, we transition from odd beats to even beats. Or I think we start on even, we move to odd, and it changes depending on repetition. Yeah, so we got a polymetric idea going on. The drums are laying down a 5/4, but the bass is in something else. and it makes it so that our repetitions don't line up perfectly. But the vocals are in 11 again. What? Yeah, man. Check out what the drums doing as far as accenting with the snare. Just ooh, interesting little bit of chromaticism there. Okay. Okay. So, is that it? Yeah, that's it. It's going to be kind of difficult to speak about the two songs in relationship to each other because I do want to compare them and speak about the time difference between them, but I don't want to infer anything that would seem like I'm talking about the band itself. I don't want this to seem like I'm saying, oh, the band changed in these ways over the 2 decades. I just want to say that these two songs represent two different sets of ideas, of compositional structures. Not necessarily that either one of these albums or the growth of the band between the albums were, created in with specific ideas in mind. Right? I don't know about the rest of the songs off of yesterday's album. I don't know the rest of the songs off of Long Day Goodnight. I don't know anything that the band has done in between, so I don't want to make any inferences into the band itself. But I do want to talk about these two songs and approach them in a way that we can analyze different approaches to composition and possibly attribute that to either, I don't know if there's been a change in bandmates or if it's just the same people who've been together for 26 years, I think is what he said, and have grown, and matured their writing in a specific way, or maybe have just changed their writing in a specific manner. They got tired of doing what they did before. Because there's a lot of interesting elements in here, and some of it, at least to my ears, having just this linear line from, what was yesterday's song? From Monument to The Longest Shadow of the Day, there's some elements in here that I would say are a product of maturation, and there's some elements in here that I see as a product of experimentation. And I do want to point at those, but I also don't want people to misconstrue my words and might disagree with me and say, no, they didn't mature this way. This was a bad thing that they did this. That's not a more mature sound. They went more mainstream or whatever. They sold out. Like, I'm not trying to make any inferences about the band themselves. I just want to compare these two songs, okay? There happens to be a lot of time between them. It's going to be possible that I make some guesses about what happened in that time. So let's start with the structure. I want to, it's interesting, right? Because this is an epic. So I kind of assumed it was going to be um, more linear. I don't know what it is with prog rock and linearity in their epics. There's so many bands we've checked out where their epics are purely linear and their non-epics follow more standard song structure. I don't know what it is about the epic that they immediately just want to ditch the verse chorus idea. Um, but I'm kind of coming around to this idea, and I think it's prevalent here. We don't really have a verse chorus idea here. We have a strictly linear track. Whereas yesterday we did have a verse chorus structure, and it was a shorter song. Again, not making any accusations about the band or their writing style, or falling into tropes. Just pointing out some observations. So we have this linear style right here, and it's interesting to see the variety, again, much like yesterday, the variety of influence here. We have more of a traditional, like prog rock slow burn at the beginning. However, it's paired slightly with some jazzier ideas, especially in their soloing melody lines. We move from that into what feels like a very hard rock guitar line. Maybe even what a hard rock band would make today. I don't know off the top of my head any, 60s or 70s hard rock guy. Oh, you know what? We did check out Judas Priest. We checked out an old and a new one. And I do think that this kind of fits into the newer Judas Priest track that we listened to musically. Not vocally, maybe vocally. I don't think I can comment on that. But the way that they go about writing the riffs, the guitar tone, it feels very much like an older hard rock band making modern hard rock music. We go from that into another quiet section. This one drops the tempo down a bit, and we transition this into a heavier version of the same idea. And we move from this into the outro solo. So there really isn't a lot going on. We do see a lot of what I think are slow burns. We tend to stick in a lot of these sections for quite a bit of time, but there isn't really an evolution on them. We just kind of sit within them. The two or three, well, I guess the three instrumental sections, the intro, the bridge, or the middle section, the third part, and our outro all have melodic variety to them because we have solos, which tend to be melodically linear. Whereas anytime that we bring in the vocals, which if I remember right, sections 2 and 4, they tend to be riff-based melodies. We give the vocalist a single riff to sing, and we'll repeat it over and over, possibly with a small variation here and there. But it is there to facilitate the lyrics rather than to be a storytelling structure musically unto itself, like the guitar solos and bass solos are. They don't have words to lean on, so the music itself must tell the story. I do think it's interesting that this happens. I don't think it's abnormal. I just kind of laid out why vocals would tend to be more linear because there is this reluctance. I mean, well, it's kind of twofold, right? Because one, we can lean on the lyrics to provide contrasting elements. But second of all, lyrics are also traditionally and very commonly conventionally poems, which means that they have a set meter to them. And having a set meter is the same thing kind of as looking at something as riff based. It has a rhythm that it's going to follow. They can change up the notes if they want, and there are occasions where we do see slight variations on specific notes. But the core rhythm must stay the same because we have the same amount of syllables in each line. So, yeah, I never really thought about that before. But that's why vocal rhythms tend to be very similar, and vocal melodies are tend to be riff based. because a lot of it is planned off of kind of has poetry as the foundation, and poetry is looping based until you get into free poetry. And we've seen some music that uses well, actually, we're getting way off topic here. Let's get back to Fate's Warning. So yeah, we have this concept of alternating riff based versus linear based melodic writing in the instrumentation versus the vocals. And so we jump back and forth between what I kind of see as proggier writing and more standard writing, which again is something that we saw in their other track. It's really interesting to see how they continue to utilize this foundational aspect of their composition. However, here we see it in a different light. Whereas before they chose to go with a standard structure, they went with an A B C B pattern and put in the technicality into chord choices, time signature, and was that it? I thought there was something else that they did that was kind of technically inclined. Here, we tend to follow more uh, standard elements of chord progressions and times and tempos. Our time signatures are varied, but they're also not as all over the place as they were in yesterday's Monument. Here we tend to sit within a single vibe. We have what do we start in 7, and when the vocals came in, we shifted to 8, and then we ran into 11 a couple of times. In fact, I think we did 11 throughout the rest of the. We might have had a 4, and then we did 11, 11. So is that 7, 4, 4, 11, 11? I think is how that went. So we do have the two unusual ones. We have the 7/4 and the 11/4. But then we also have quite a few moments of 4/4, which we didn't have any in Monuments. And, we stick with these time signatures for quite some time as well. There's not a lot of switching up of ideas. So there's still a bit of technicality in the meter choice, but it's not as frantic, or I should say frantically shifted as it was in yesterday's. And we also don't have anything ridiculously odd like the 13/8 we heard in Monument. So, like I said, we still have this pairing up of palatable rock with more technical aspects from prog rock, bringing them together into something that I feel has depth but is still digestible by most people. But we just went about it in a different way. And I think that's really cool. Instead of taking a traditional rock sound and putting technicality into it in several places, we took more of a prog rock template and injected some pure rock into it. So coming about it from the opposite direction. But I think the end result is still very similar. It has that same vibe to it where, again, it's heavily digestible, but there's depth to it if you're looking for it. And I'm coming around to the idea. I mean, I've only looked at 2 songs of theirs, but this is definitely a strong element of their writing. And I've talked in the past about bridge bands, or I mean, even just bridge albums, bridge songs, whatever you want to call it. But music that will help somebody jump from one level of complexity to the next. In the past, I think I've mostly talked about it in the forms of extreme metal, the bands that kind of pair more extreme elements with more traditional or digestible elements to help bring people into that next level. Growling is one of these where maybe the music hasn't shifted. It's music that's more palatable, but they incorporate growls every once in a while. Harsh vocals in general, you slowly get used to them until you can make the jump to songs that are fully harsh vocals. And I think this is a good way of bringing people who are traditionally more radio rock friendly into something that might be a bit more technical and have that extra meat on it, to bring them into pure prog rock, stuff that kind of goes more into the avant-garde or jazzy elements and really start pushing outside the bounds of traditional rock music. I think this is a good band to introduce I mean, it also works the other way, right? People who want super technical music, it can help them appreciate some of the aspects of simpler music and maybe even help them find some traditional hard rock bands that sound like pieces of this song that they enjoy. So they're the bridge between two sides of a coin. So that's a terrible analogy. You guys get the gist though, right? All right. The next thing I want to talk about is, I mean, let's talk about that bass, right? That is such a tasty bass tone. It has this nice warmth to it, nice width to it, and I love the way it sounds in the higher range. It just has this beauty to it. And I think a lot of it comes down to the tone, of course, and the way it's EQ'd, but also the way it's played. There is a strong element of finesse to it. It's certainly finger played, finger picked, based on the attack. That is my guess. But there's also, like I said, this strong amount of finesse where it's not really heavy handed either. There's a lot of precision and speed and just elegance to the picking style that goes into it. And at least to me, it has sort of a jazzier vibe. It's lighter on the touch. It's not really going for those thonky metal, bassy punches. It's more of going for the elegance of the bass guitar, which is something that jazz typically excels in. And it is this beautiful merger of like rock tone with jazz playing, and it works so well in the context, especially given the opening of this song. I really want to touch on this first, before we go diving into the rest of the elements, because I feel like the rest of the song certainly moves into more traditional rock areas, which is interesting given, yesterday we were kind of all over the place with influences. This one is definitely rooted in rock's history. We see various sides of rock throughout this one. And technically, blues is a precursor to rock and roll, so there is a direct lineage between some of the jazzier elements here and the rest of the rock concept. So I guess we could say that this is like a movement through rock's history in a sense, but I feel like that's a bit of a stretch. So we're just going to say that they have a nice jazz opening. And what I mean by that is it mostly comes down to chord choices and dynamic aspects. There's a little bit of stuff in the melody writing for both guitar and bass solo sections, but it gets that gets a little too deep into music theory. So I think we're just going to stick with these easier to digest topics because I think they're going to portray the right ideas and while also being easily understood by people who don't have a music theory background. So volume dynamics, I think, is a huge thing. A lot of rock music does not really do quiet or subtle. And it's not even just the volume level itself, it really is the way that the notes are performed. It's the subtlety in the inflection, the subtlety in the performance, the subtlety in this case of the picking. And that paired with the quieter opening and just the low volume dynamic. I mean, if we, again, most rock songs, well, actually, most songs in general these days tend to be all at one volume. Whether it is a quiet or loud section, the entire song sits at a single volume. And our opening here is legitimately massively quieter than our loudest moment. But we also have this lightness, this finesse going on in both the bass and the guitar, in how they pick the instrument, how they create the sounds. It's not as harsh or aggressive as rock is. I think it's difficult to talk about with picking, so I think I'm going to return to drumming, which I think is just easier to visualize. But in rock drums, it's usually these big arm movements. When you want to hit the cymbal, you bring your whole arm up, you bring your whole arm down with force and speed. Whereas in jazz, cymbal work is traditionally more of a wrist thing. It's about bringing the levity to it. and creating this element of lightness, right? There are some heavier styles of jazz that might introduce some heavier or wider arm movements, but for the most part, when you're thinking of your typical, swing or big band blues stuff, it's all going to be a gentler approach to performance. And it's no different with jazz and guitar. Your picking in rock and metal music is going to be more aggressive. It's going to be harder. It's going to have a harsher attack to it than it does in jazz. So that is one way that the opening has a very strong jazz background. But we can also look at the chordal progression, and not even so much the progression, because there really isn't much of a foundational chord element going on here. It's more of the notes chosen by the soloists to incorporate into their solo. And what we can do is we can take all the notes that they're playing and we can um, tally them out. How many times is a C played? How many times is a C sharp played? How many times is a D played? And we can look at the ones that are most often picked and figure out what chord they belong to. Then everything else is going to be outside of the, well, not the chord, the key that they belong to. And then we can say that all the other notes are outside of the key. So we can have a home key, and then we can have the notes that are outside of it being played as sort of extra spices, right? It tells you the 7 or 8 notes that would sound good together to create this specific tone or emotion. Everything else can be added to kind of give it a little zest, a little spice, maybe a little extra dissonance, or maybe a little bit of a major lift where you add a little bit of positivity into a minor chord, which tends to have a little bit more sadness to it. So you can kind of modulate the vibe or the feeling of a key by choosing other notes to sparsely utilize in it. And so the interesting thing about jazz is that, especially when you get into some more of the complex jazz subgenres, you start utilizing some very complex, unusual, jazzy sounding uh, chords in your keys. So it's like minor. How should I put this in, like, I guess not entirely accurate, but I think for the purpose of this conversation, it's like modularity to a key. Normally, we would have an F in this key, but for the sake of this song, we're actually going to use an F sharp here. Or maybe this song doesn't have an A flat in it, but we still want to keep our A. We're going to add an A flat in here. We're just going to add an extra note. So we end up having a chord with special properties to it, with an added ninth, or an augmented chord, or, with a raised seventh, right? So, or a flat 10th or whatever. Like, we're just going to subtly change these things, and you can get chord names that can get quite complex. And this is something that I sort of attribute a lot to jazz. Classical can also work within these odd or unusual chords as well, but to me, jazz is really where they sit. And if you've ever heard a chord just like, man, that's jazzy, that's probably what it is. They've started to incorporate some of these extra modulations to the standard chords themselves. And that's what we saw at the beginning of this song. We saw a lot of these modular. It sounds weird saying, because it is just like not the right phrase for it, musically speaking, but I think it really gets the point across, and it makes a lot more sense, honestly, especially with today's language. So yeah, that's why I chuckle a little bit. But yeah, we have these modulated chords being played over, or actually played within, technically. Like I said, I don't remember a chord foundation existing here. It was more of analyzing the notes that the soloists were playing. So yeah, we have these jazzy chords, and then we have this jazzy style of playing, and the entire opening, especially paired with the quieter volume, feels very much like a bit of a jazz section. It feels like the rhythm section starting out quietly at the beginning of maybe a little bit more of a bombastic song. Maybe it is sort of like a bluesy swing, just like a real subtle swing track that doesn't really get big at any moment. But then we move from that, and like I said, I absolutely love that section. We get our introduction to the guitar tone and the bass tone. Both are beautiful, and we get this really nice melody writing between both of these instruments. Very well done section overall. And honestly, if that opening 2 minutes or whatever was its own track, and that's what I had to listen to, I'd still have nothing but praise for it. It's a really well done section of the song. Then we move into some pretty standard hard rock. And I don't know that I have anything specific to say about this other than the fact that it does what it does very well. This is iterative hard rock. They've really honed down what makes this style of music work. I was jamming more than I usually jam out during these reactions. It is infectious, it is energetic. And, that's what happens when a genre's been around for 40 or 50 years, give or take. Um, Actually, I don't know when this came out in 2020. So yeah, the genre of hard rock's been around for a long time, and it's had time to mature and really drill down into a very distilled version of itself. What makes this genre work, and they really nailed it. It just came in and did exactly what hard rock is supposed to do. It's driving, it's energetic, and it's just like I said, very very well done. We move from that into the next section, which is sort of the slower section. The cool thing about this is that I don't think there was anything that stood out to me specifically in this section, but when we brought in the distorted guitars in the next section. And I had mentioned that the transition between this third and fourth section was a bit rough because it was just silence and then bam, the next part, right? These heavy guitars came in. But I think it worked because one, massive contrast. We went from 0 to 10 in a beat. But two, we're reutilizing these ideas we just listened to in a brand new context. And what's interesting about this context and what all of this is building towards is that it feels doomy, right? It's so cool because in the previous section we played the exact same notes and it was a fine section. There's nothing really that stood out to it as far as I was concerned. They did a great job at bringing the intensity down and kind of lulling me into this beautiful soundscape. And then they gave me that same sound, and I was like, wait a minute, we've been playing Doom without the distortion? And it's a wild thing to sort of land upon. And then I was reminded, wait a second, this is a prog band. The last time we checked them out, their influences were hard rock, classical, jazz, and Spanish. So, rock and then a bunch of stuff that's not rock. Kind of rock adjacent, but not rock. I don't think most people would categorize any of those three as rock genres. And here we are. These guys have pulled in some new ideas over the years. They got some doom going on here. And I think that's phenomenal. It shows a band who does not want to rest on their laurels and will continue to, include and expand upon, well, yeah, they will they will expand upon their horizons and listen to new music and find ways to incorporate their new influences and passions into their old style. And it's just very cool to see that. Um, there's one other thing I want to talk about. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then we finish out with the guitar solo. I thought it was really cool. I love the way they write melodies. They're linear melodies, anyways. Their vocals are catchy, right? But to me, that's not the strong part for them. I like to come back to listen to their solos. I think their solo writing is so good, and I wish they would apply that to their other melodies, specifically the vocal melodies that that get picked up here and there. But this idea of listening to new music, broadening your musical horizons to include in your projects, I think is an interesting aspect of the maturity of this band, where they don't ever feel like they're good enough. There's always room for improvement. There's always things to learn. There's always new ideas to take in and allow them to churn and see what gets spit out when combined with their style of music. But there's also a maturation in their old stuff, right? Their core element, the prog rock, hard rock combination. There's a lot of maturity in the writing in that as well. And I kind of spoke about it a little bit previously, but I think that their moments where they are the strongest is their solo writing. It's what I think I talked about most yesterday. Um, and it's a huge part of what I enjoy out of this song as well. I just spent, like 10, 15 minutes talking about the opening aspect of the song, which is their linear storytelling melody writing during a solo section. Like, to me, that's their bread and butter. That's what they do best. And here, again, no difference. The opening section had that, the third section had it, and this outro solo. And there's something about the way that they craft a story and allow melodies to flow from one idea to the next. There are occasions where I feel it gets a little segmented, or maybe there's a rough stop and start, but honestly, because everything else flows so nicely, it tends to be more of a conscious decision to create contrast in their transition ideas and to specifically say, hey, we've just had 4 bars or whatever of this beautiful flowing idea. Let's put a rigid stop here to symbolize something, and we can move into another idea that is adjacent to it, but not necessarily something that would work perfectly well. And it's just this very conscious idea to put a break in there rather than saying, or what appears that a lot of guitarists tend to do in these rock and metal solos, which is to do 4 bars of this and then 4 bars of this and then 4 bars of this, which I've talked about in the past. I don't think there's anything negative to it. It feels very rock, right? And I don't know if people do it because that's what the genre has done for decades, or if because that's what they're most skilled in, or whatever. It's just another way to write a solo section, but I personally just really prefer these linear storytelling styles. And, these guys they do it so well. They really do. Their solos, whether they're playing classical guitar or jazz or traditional, hard rock style guitar solos, it takes you on a journey. You can just close your eyes and follow along, and they will lead you. There's no repetition, there's no cycle back points outside of reutilizing older ideas. Like, they will take an older idea, not necessarily like a riff, but just something that they've played before and bring it back in a new context. Maybe it'll exit out into a new idea, or maybe we came into it from a new idea. So there is this idea of recontextualization of concepts they've already written, but they're, as far as I've heard in these 2 songs, not too much of an idea of riff-based or loop-based guitar soloing, and it always tells these beautiful stories to me. And that is, if we get Fate's Warning on the channel again, if I end up, actually, this album I might look into, Long Day Good Night, came out a year and a half ago, November 2020, might be something that I need to look into, because I do really enjoy this song. I think it's a nice merger between a couple of different genres while also being an evolution of what they've kind of set up, I feel, from their earlier works. Yeah, let's dive into the lyrics right here. I'm going to see if any of this kind of lines up. Again, I don't really think I analyzed any large overarching thematic concepts in the music. It feels like, just a series of really strong ideas with great transitions between them that kind of just sound great on their own. But we're going to see what the themes are in here and see if maybe I can match that over to some musical concepts. Verse 1, longest shadow of the day stretches out into the gray, paints our flight in softened light, bends our aim to the night. Verse 2, longest shadow of the day reaches out along the way, shrouds our sight in failing light, turns our gaze to the night. Interesting that we've repeated the rhyming scheme of AABB, but also have repeated the exact rhymes of A and ite. So we have day gray, light night, day way, light night. Well, in fact, yeah, actually, a lot of these words are repeated. Daylight and night are repeated in both of these verses. See, verse 3. How long can this last? How long will we stray in this plight of fading light, the longest shadow of the day? Will we all go down, we all fall prey, lose the fight to the dying light, the longest shadow of the day? That's repeated a few times, and then the outro is, oh, 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 the longest shadow of the day. That's probably not the right melody, but that's anytime that I see O's in like straight out in lyrics, I always have to sing them funnily because it I don't know, it's just the way my brain works. It's weird to see the word O written out like 5 times in a row. I don't think the brain is meant to process that. That's just not how we speak. So yeah, breaking this down though, I kind of got nothing. It seems to be that there's some sort of um like the longest shadow of the day makes me think of something metaphorical, like an action that has cast negative consequence over things, and it continues to haunt them or continues to control their possible actions in the future. It continues to be a hurdle, right? That's kind of the what I'm getting. And verse 3 just, I mean, verses 1 and 2 describe it, right? It is a hurdle. It is this thing that's cast over us. Verse 3 basically says, how long can we last? You know, how long is this going to happen? Will we be able to defeat it, get past it, or will we succumb? That's kind of all it seems to say to me. It seems to be very on the surface, very straightforward lyrically. And unfortunately, I don't really see much of this in the music. I guess, I mean, the best thing I can say about the music is that we do kind of move in and out between these ideas of solemn elements and more bombastic, higher energy, higher intensity sections. So maybe this is the battle of trying to fight through the shadow, trying to get to the other side. And fortunately, we end the song with a fade out of something that is semi triumphant in the guitar solo. So maybe there is the implication that if we persevere, we will get past it. There will be the victory. And that's kind of the only thing I have to tie the lyrics to the music. So, yeah, this was wonderful. I'm digging Fate's Warning. Monuments was good, but I don't think something that would catch me for casual listening. However, this song I think has a lot of potential. Like I said, shows maturation. And I've said before that I'm a huge fan of innovation, or sorry, iteration in music. I completely appreciate when bands try new things, break molds, create new genres, whatever. And I will certainly listen to that and enjoy it, but typically that first crack at something is going to be a bit flawed. And the chances of me enjoying it casually, I mean, it's not 100%. Sometimes I'll listen to something, I'll be like, yep, they broke new ground. It's flawed, but I can get past the flaws. I'll listen to this every day. But other times I will, I won't be able to listen to it casually. And I'll wait until another band or, multiple bands come down the way and really refine it into something that is more palatable for me. And I think that's what happened here, where their first album, I think, is a really interesting combination of ideas, but it was missing that oomph. It was missing that little extra refinement that they certainly have at least here 26 years later. I'm sure that refinement happened earlier in their career as well, but this song, at least assuming the rest of the album is similar to it, is certainly something I think I could get into. So those are my thoughts on Fate's Warnings, The Longest Shadow of the Day. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of this one. If you agree with me, disagree with me, anything you'd like to add, let me know. Above the comment section, there's a description box, and there's a link for Linktree. Takes you to this joint right here. You can find links for everything. You have your own special selection you'd like to submit, it's in there. You want to follow me on Twitter? It's in there. You want to join the Patreon, vote on future themes and songs? That link is in there too. There's a bunch of it. Go ahead and check it out. Above the description box, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. As usual, we're going to look at our penultimate bad song and our last special selection for the week. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.